Hello everyone, I'm Nathan P. Butler, author of A Saga on Home Video and host of From the Star Wars Home Video Library here on YouTube, and this is Star Wars Home Video Year by Year. This time we take a look at 1985. Now, that's not a banner year for Star Wars Home Video by any means. 1984, right before it, we had The Empire Strikes Back hit Home Video. 1986, right after it, we're going to see Return of the Jedi hit Home Video. 85 is kind of a weird lull year, but there are some things to take a look at from the US market that are new, and from foreign markets in particular cases that we want to point out here. But one important thing that's going on in 1985 is that Ben Burtt is diving in and remastering all the audio for A New Hope for subsequent home video release starting in 1986. You might recall that originally in theaters, C-3PO's line about the tractor beam and how it actually works was missing, and they fixed it once it was back in theaters. And then by the time it eventually made it to its last run, it was gone again with the subtitle, and then the home video release, yes, it was missing in that case as well. We will eventually see it restored in 1986 because of part of that digitally remastering. We'll see more about that in 86 next time, but the key is it's being done in 85, but not affecting any 1985 releases. For broader context here, Star Wars is done in theaters essentially. Return of the Jedi got its initial theatrical release in 83. It's 2 years later. Things are kind of winding down. But Star Wars is making small, appearances on television, for better or worse. The first Ewok telemovie, Caravan of Courage, had premiered in 1984. In 1985, we see the release of the second one in the US again through ABC on television, The Battle for Endor, which again, yes, got theatrical releases in other parts of the world, just not here. This is also the year on television that sees the premiere of Droids and Ewoks, 2 cartoon series by Nelvana Limited that would appear also on ABC. Droids would only last 1 season and a special. Ewoks would last 2 seasons, but those who've watched it really kind of wish it hadn't gotten that second season because of how incredibly horrid it actually was. But the first seasons of both kick off here in 1985. Those series, by the way, would never see a complete home video release in the United States, and even in the UK, they'd be missing an episode out of each season. Though my understanding is that in some other foreign markets, I think maybe Mexico, it actually got a full release, but certainly not here. But they're premiering on television at least in 85, so Star Wars is still in the public consciousness, but not with those great live-action films in theaters, more with the kind of kiddie fare showing up on TV. You can tell things are kind of winding down into a bit of a lull for Star Wars. Not a true Dark Age. Talked about that before. You can see supplement episode, I believe, 6 from the Star Wars library for more information about why the Dark Age wasn't really much of a Dark Age. I'm not going to go into it here. Suffice to say, things are happening in Star Wars. Not as much as before, but things are happening. On home video, again, things are happening. Not much as before, but things are happening. In the US, probably the most noteworthy thing that we see in 1985 is another pair of LaserDisc releases. Now you might say, okay, we just saw A New Hope get released on LaserDisc in 82. We just saw the CBS Fox rebranding in 83. What is this? Some kind of reissue of the same thing again? No. Take a look at the corner. Stereo Standard Play. I mentioned before there are essentially 2 different main versions of LaserDisc, CLV and CAV, Extended Play or Standard Play respectively. Extended Play doesn't have as much features on more advanced machines in terms of like freeze frames and stuff like that, but Extended Play can fit 1 hour on each side of a single disc, so you can fit all of A New Hope or Empire onto a single LaserDisc if you do some time compression. Well, CAV, or Standard Play, can only fit about half an hour on either side. It's got better features and more advanced players, but only half an hour per side. That's kind of a pain in the butt. So when putting the Star Wars films on CAV, Standard Play LaserDiscs, would they time compress them to keep it at least to 2 discs, or actually use 3 to cover an entire film? They use 3. This sucker is pretty heavy, okay, relative to the other ones here. This is the Standard Play version of A New Hope, and inside, usually covered with this like sort of tissue paper, almost plastic kind of wrap to keep them safe, we have not 1, not 2, but 3 discs to make up the entirety of A New Hope on Standard Play. Finally, the original film is available on LaserDisc without time compression. It's got the pain in the ass of Standard Play where you gotta have 3 frickin' discs to get through the movie, which means you gotta play both sides of a disc and then switch to another disc and play both sides and so on, which isn't ideal, but at least it's not time compressed anymore. Likewise in 85, just 1 year after the extended play version was released, with time compression, we have the non-time compressed standard play version of The Empire Strikes Back, also on 3 discs, released in 1985. We also have a noteworthy behind-the-scenes release in 1985. You see, just as there were 3 films in the original trilogy, there were sort of 3 main behind-the-scenes specials of that era. We had The Making of Star Wars, SPFX The Empire Strikes Back, and then Classic Creatures Return of the Jedi. There was another, though, that was a little bit more broad in scope, not focusing just on one film, though mostly on Jedi, which is From Star Wars to Jedi, The Making of a Saga. So, 4, but one is more broad than the other 3 that are sort of 1 per film. Well, the one that we hadn't seen released of those main 3, released in the US, finally got a release in 1985 through another of our players here, Playhouse Video. That is Classic Creatures Return of the Jedi, here released on VHS. It is also available on beta from Playhouse Video. Not to be outdone, though, Japan actually got a Laserdisc release of the one that hadn't had a release in the US at all yet, which was, if I take the obi off of here, very carefully, From Star Wars to Jedi, The Making of a Saga. And lastly, perhaps because it got a theatrical release broadly, we actually see some early home video releases of the Ewok Adventure, or Caravan of Courage and Ewok Adventure, in other markets, like, for example, in the UK. Now, I have 2 copies of the VHS release. There is, I believe, a beta version and a V2000 version of this one. The reason I have 2 copies here is because it's kind of weird in that, well, one of them's faded like crazy, but it seems like they were kind of in the middle of the whole thing of having the required ratings on cassettes, depending on when they're being produced. So you'll see some of these where the rating is actually printed, but it is just white on the black cassette background there. But you'll also see some where it actually has a sticker of the rating on there. And you can see slight differences in packaging here, I believe just from fading, with the exception of maybe a little bit around the ratings. But suffice to say, even though my copies in neither case are pristine, we actually saw a release of the first Ewok telemovie the year after it aired over in the UK. And interestingly enough, it was through CBS Fox Video. We will find that when we do finally see those releases in the US, they will not be through CBS Fox Video. But more on that, for the US at least, in 1990. So yeah, not a major year for home video in the US, but 1985 isn't without its charms and collectibles, so to speak. But the next year is going to see the release of Return of the Jedi on home video, finishing out the trilogy for those who want to watch at home. So join us next time as we check out 1986.